Today is the day. The world will see your reckoning.
Directed by Brent and Blake Cousins, aka the Cousins Brothers, we are talking Day of the Wicked. And I was sent this screener and it's been described as the Hawaiian Evil Dead. Now this is an incredibly low budget movie. They actually shared with me the budget, which I won't give out, but I have to say it's an incredibly low budget and an incredibly impressive movie for the purported budget. So what is the story? Well, it focuses primarily on this guy who is a little bit shunned from society, and he's an electrician, and he and a group of other kind of construction workers are hired to go and deal with this kind of dilapidated old house out in the middle of the kind of like this rural area. And this guy gets there first, this electrician, and he ends up finding this book, the Necronomicon, and starts to read it and kind of gets influenced by his by the power of the Necronomicon. And then this guy, John Jones, starts to effectively want to infect other people with this kind of demonic sort of influence and take revenge on his co-workers who he feels bully him, and, you know, go on from there, let's just say. At the same time, we have this couple of kind of, I guess, paranormal researchers over in Hollywood, sort of trying to put the pieces together. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So this is an incredibly creative movie, considering it's such a low budget movie, and there is a lot of VFX here, both digital and practical, and it's a lot of fun because of it. So the movie isn't a comedy, it's not a horror comedy, but there is somewhat of a playful edge to it, you might say. What can I say? A little bit more detail about what I liked about this film. So yeah, loads of VFX, loads of possessions, people getting torn in half, turning into demons, giant monsters, all sorts of stuff. I mean, this is like, necessity is the mother of invention, effectively, is the saying. And again, considering such a low budget, it really is very impressive the amount of stuff that we see on screen, and much of it is, you know, good quality for, you know, for a kind of lower budget indie movie. It's perfectly acceptable, I think, for the kind of the masses for the most part, with some fun and variety of kind of antagonistic forces, creatures, demonic things, various kind of like mutations and stuff that all kind of spring out. Yeah, it's kind of pretty impressive in that respect. The story, you know, it has some interesting characters. Our main character of John Jones, this guy who is the bullied person, you know, he's his character, you feel he's an easily manipulated sort of person, and he's carrying all this kind of resentment. His wife's divorced him because she cheated and things like this, and he's getting bullied, and he has this kind of female friend that kind of the co-workers can keep leering over and stuff. So you feel that sort of fragile personality come through, and that then personality be kind of manipulated by these forces and then start to kind of crack. And, you know, I think it's well done. And what this movie also does is have some quite nuanced supporting characters. So it would have been quite easy to make all of the supporting characters, all these kind of fellow construction workers, quite horrible to him and quite mean. But there are a couple that are actually sort of, you know, just leave him alone, that sort of thing. Then they kind of think he's a little weird, but they don't want to see him harmed in any way exactly. And again, it has this kind of this a little bit more subtlety with some of the characters. Are kind of this guy called Orlando. You know, he is like I suppose like the boss of this kind of group of people. There's like two other foremen that come in, and there's some characters here that have some kind of nuance. Where they didn't really need to, because ultimately it's just kind of a little bit of depth for the characters. Well, it doesn't really have a huge amount of impact on the story per se, but it just gives these sort of characters a little bit more believability and relatability in regards to you know, how we kind of relate to them and stuff. The movie's plot, I have to say, is quite far-reaching, and you know, we see almost like at the start of a kind of demonic apocalypse. So it certainly has far-reaching kind of consequences. It has an element of just goofy fun that's all through the movie. Various kind of set pieces on the film and stuff like that that are quite kind of fun to watch. And they've made use of this, what looks to be like a kind of an abandoned house or a very run-down sort of building. And again, it's a good setting for this kind of, these construction workers. And there's obviously, that's the reason why they're there and stuff. And there are a few kind of like fun callbacks to horror properties. Obviously the Evil Dead, but there's some, you know, other ones like the Poltergeist franchise, for example. So that's all kind of quite fun. So this is a lower budget movie, and as such, obviously, if you are just wanting your standard Hollywood produced fare, it's going to seem a little bit cheap to some. So that's obviously the start of maybe where the negatives will come in. And like I said, this film isn't going to be for everyone. It is a very low budget film, and they do a hell of a lot with the budget that they've got. But inevitably, there is two elements here that obviously they can't do everything they want, I suppose, with the budget that they've got, and it does kind of show on screen at times. VFX wise, I've got to say it's very impressive for the budget, but there are still some digital effects that obviously look digital and things like that. So those of you who complain about digital effects and stuff, yeah, there's a good amount here, but I think it was fine. I actually think the effects were quite impressive, but you know, we ain't talking a movie made for Shudder or anything like that really here. So there's that. So there are other elements here. Maybe I feel the movie had a little bit of a misstep on. Primarily for me are the sequences involving these two investigators, which I thought was completely unnecessary, and I think it clearly reshoots because they have no interaction with the main storyline, and their mini plot I felt feels really tacked on to me, and I suspect maybe was filmed after the fact to increase the kind of the running time or something like that. I think one of the actress is a YouTuber or some type of influencer, so I'm just guessing that they've added sequences so she could tweet or whatever it is, I guess, but they just didn't really add anything to me, and I actually think this movie would have benefited from it cutting those bits out, if I'm honest with you, because the movie's pacing, I think, does suffer a little bit. Not just because of those sequences, although they certainly don't help, but I just feel sometimes the kind of the interactions with people are just a little bit slow paced, is the best way to describe it. So it makes the movie lose that kind of kinetic edge. Now, this has been described by the filmmakers as the Hawaiian Evil Dead. Now, one of the things about the Evil Dead movies, especially if you're talking the first two, is that sort of, that tense feeling, that feeling of, you know, stuff could happen at any moment, you know, Ash is very much a bag of nerves, and we don't really have that here because I just feel the pacing is just a little bit too relaxed, a little bit too slow, and I think this is partly down to these extra scenes with these kind of paranormal investigators that are completely superfluous, but also some of the kind of the interactions and the dialogue, they just seem a little bit too like relaxed and slow paced to me, so it kind of dissipates the tension to a degree. Now, again, if this movie's budget is to be believed, these are probably not, for the most part, paid actors. They're probably just friends of the filmmakers. So we have to be a little bit kind of forgiving in regards to the quality of the acting. But The acting is a little bit on the kind of the hammy side. Let me just kind of say that kindly. And like I said, it really lacks any sort of agency or urgency from the kind of the performances to really give it much of a kind of dramatic edge. It's fun, and as I say, I think the VFX do a lot of the heavy lifting here, but the performances are not exactly dramatic. I also think the lighting could have been a little better here. It's a little bit too overlit, if anything. And I think, so again, if you're comparing this to The Evil Dead, you've got to think of the darkness outside, the forest outside the shack, and the use of kind of like dry ice and stuff. And yes, it might have been a bit cheesy, but a lot of this is filmed in kind of the day, or if it is filmed, you know, a little bit darker in the tunnel scenes. I just think it could have been a little bit creepier had they kind of made use of a little bit of more dramatic lighting, kind of had a bit more kind of like maybe sequences during the kind of the evening or the night to make it a little bit more kind of creepier. As it stands at the moment, it's, as I say, a little bit, feels a little bit toothless in some ways. Overall though, it's a really fun movie, and I think it's a really good example of independent filmmakers using their imagination and inventive ways to be creative on screen. And there's a lot of monsters and VFX and demonic stuff on screen, lots of kind of fun references, and some likeable characters, even if the acting isn't completely fantastic. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Considering the budget, I feel this is definitely an achievement. Have you seen it? Would you see it based on what I've told you? Please let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.